Well, good afternoon. I think that we can start and we let the people join in at a later stage. We were waiting for a couple of more, but this is a recorded session, so you can catch up through our YouTube channel at a later stage if you prefer to do so. So let me introduce myself. First of all, my name is Tiziana O'Hara, and I work for a cooperative development body based in Belfast called the Co-operative Alternatives. This is new series of webinars that we have called the new co-ops on the block. And through this series, we wanted to introduce you to new emerging cooperatives, particularly in Northern Ireland. And today we wanted to introduce you to Edenderry Energy Village. But before we go there, I just wanted to thank our founders, the Belfast City Council, that has allowed us to cover different kind of emerging cooperatives in Northern Ireland. And we did that in last month with a community farm, and today with a community energy project. We also run cooperative skills training seminars, and here are some of the dates of the forthcoming webinars. So thank you again to the Belfast City Council for attending today. So let us really talk about Edenderry. Edenderry Village Energy was registered in September 2021. So you are going to meet a very young society. It has been registered as a community benefit society. And as a cooperative, this cooperative intends to become a profitable enterprise, of course, but democratically owned and managed by its members, and also benefiting the community, the local community at large. Now more than before, we needed to really explore new ways to generate and save energy. So we are delighted that these new initiatives are here in Northern Ireland. And we needed to address the central issues that our region is coping with. So how can we make energy more affordable? How can we become more reliant on the renewable sources we have? How can we collectively act for a sustainable future now? So this society is an example of how a group of committed citizens, and we are welcoming now Ronan Davison-Kernan, one of the founder members. So this committed group of citizens had a vision and for their local community, and I try to address the questions that we ask above. So Ronan will then now tell us a bit more about the project, at what stage they are, how they started, and then we open for a question and answer session. We want also to share some of the learning from the development point of view. These are our details. And if you want to get in touch through our website, that's the best way. Thank you very much. I will pass now to Ronan.
Thank you very much, Tiziana. Let's see if this works. Is that showing again? Yeah. Hey, second time. Okay. Okay. So thank you very much, Tiziana. Thank you for the opportunity to present, and thank you again for all the help you've given us so far. As Tiziana said, we're quite a new co-op. In fact, the very germ of the idea of this was just over a year ago. Yeah, just over a year ago last week, actually. So so we've come quite a long way, but you'll soon see that we've got quite a long way to go yet. Before I go into any detail on what we're doing and on Edenderry itself, my background, I am an electrical engineer, and my day job is as a network planner for Sony, who are the transmission system operator for Northern Ireland. So in my day job, I'm concerned with connecting big wind farms and building transmission circuits and all of that sort of very large scale infrastructure. Whereas what we're talking about here is obviously the opposite end of the scale, the community energy side of things. And as I'll go through a bit now, obviously, as we work through the energy transition over the next 30 years, probably, all of that's going to be important. But something that's really been neglected here, particularly until now, is that community energy, that local scale stuff. So our idea started last year because a friend of mine who also lives in Edenderry was working on something called a district heating system. He's an engineer as well. He's a mechanical engineer. And I'll talk a bit about this more as we go along. But he's working on this project in Tyneside in England for the local council there, for South Tyneside Council, taking heat out of the River Tyne and distributing that amongst a couple of council properties in the area. We were talking about it and we were thinking, Belfast Council wouldn't be able to do that, blah, 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 blah. Wouldn't it be great to do something like that here? And then we realized, well, if you can do it here, why don't we try and do it here? And that was the germ of this idea. So again, I'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. Come on, can I change screen? Yes! I assume that's change screen okay for you. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so what is Edenderry? I moved to Belfast as a student. I'd never heard of Edenderry. It's Edenderry Village, although it's called a village, but it is technically part of Belfast. It's a little hidden gem in South Belfast, just actually on the boundary of Belfast Council area, but in the Lagan Valley constituency. It's a little village on the banks of the Lagan, and even though you're in Belfast, you think you're going into the middle of the countryside. There's no phone signal here, bizarrely. You're less than a mile from Shaw's Bridge. There's no phone signal. It's always about 3 degrees colder in the morning than it is anywhere else. So it's in some ways it's a bit like stepping back in time. And you can see it there just near Lady Dixon Park in South Belfast there, just off the outer ring. This is what it looks like, although not today. It's a little bit grayer today. But it's home to 400 people. What you can't see just off the screen there on the left is the Lagan itself, but it's just on the edge of those trees. There's about 200 houses, or at least there will be in about a month when they finish the latest development. It was originally, this sort of bizarre settlement was originally a linen mill. And the houses you can see on the top left of the screen there, they were the site of the original mill, which operated from the 1800s to the 1980s. And it was built by somebody called John Shaw Brown, whose family Shaw's Bridge are named after. So most of the housing you can see in the lower half of the screen here, these sort of traditional brick houses, they were built as accommodation for the workers. And then the houses at the top there are newer ones that have been built since the 90s. So it's got quite an industrial past. The river was used for providing power to the mill, for exporting the linen out, etc. And in that sense, it's sort of a traditional workers community. But the mill closed in the 80s, and since then it's transitioned just to a entirely residential. There's no businesses in the village now. The closest thing to a business is one gospel hall, of which I believe nobody in the village is actually a member of anymore. As I said, about half the houses, so about 100 of them are this terrace style. So that would be the same as you would see in a lot of places in Belfast, particularly the likes of the Holy Lands or Stranmillis, the student areas, and in and around the Springfield Road, Shankill Road, or the Newton Arch Road, essentially all traditional workers' housing. And a lot of them now have extensions, but a lot of them are just those original houses, and they're all about 100 years old or so quite relatively poorly insulated, etc. Now, the Edenderry has quite a young community now. It used to be, up till about 25 years ago, it used to be, with its industrial heritage and everything, where the 12th of July parade started in Belfast. And it had shall we say, a reputation of representing only one side of the community because of that. Nowadays, it's a very mixed, as I said, young families, and it's a very open place. There's a very active residents association. There's allotments. There's Halloween events. There's a pumpkin parade every year. that sort of thing. So there's a fantastic sense of community in the place, and it's sort of the perfect place for setting up a co-op like what we have. Also, about half the housing and most of the old houses are still heated by oil, which is an important point that I'll come back to. And as I said, they are quite badly insulated, and options for improving that are quite limited. There's just another view from street view. So you can see there on the right, the sort of traditional houses, and then more modern ones at the back there that are about 15 years old. The end of that street on the right, always people passing through Edenderry always find this amusing because it feels like you're walking through sort of the Newton Arch Road in East Belfast, and then suddenly you're in a field. And the field is a public right of way, and 2 minutes up through the field and you're at the Giant's Ring. So it is literally right on the edge of Belfast. This shows you kind of an idea again of where we are. That's Edenderry on the bottom left, and the River Lagan. You can see the Giant's Ring on the right. But what this is showing is the land around us that's owned by the National Trust. So that's all again publicly accessible, managed very well. Actually, a lot of tree planting, etc., going on. And then just across the river
National
from
Trust
us,
area is bigger than I thought it was.
yeah, it's quite substantial, and it's something I'll come back to in a few slides, because they're an important stakeholder in what we're doing. Then across the river from us is Barnett Domain, Malone House, Mary Peters Track. So we're very fortunate in where we're situated. Right. And the Lagan itself is a huge.
There's not a Rosalind on the participants. We're up to 9 participants now.
So anyway, enough about Edenderry. Why do we need to act on heating? Because our project is a district heating system, and I'll come back to that on the next slide. But why is heating something important? Well, climate change, obviously. Like, as I know from my day job, we've made great strides towards renewable energy in Northern Ireland. We're renewable electricity in Northern Ireland. About 45% of our electricity comes from renewable sources, and that's set to rise to at least 70% by 2030. But electricity is only a third of our emissions. If even it might, I know it's actually less than a third. It's a third of our energy emissions. The rest comes from transport and from heating. Now, transport, again, we're making strides there towards electrification, but particularly in Northern Ireland, we're very far behind on heating. Most houses here are still heated by oil, which is marginally better than coal, but is still a very polluting, high emission source of heat. And I mean, that graph on the right there, I took that from a BBC News article yesterday. As well as the emissions issue, the price of fossil fuels are volatile. I mean, you only have to look at any news in the last week or two to see that. But even before the current war in Ukraine, they've been ticking steadily upwards. And as fossil fuel reserves go down, that price won't go down. It'll steadily march upwards. So the price of a fill of oil has more than doubled since last year. Never mind farther back. And all that money spent on heating houses, on fossil fuels, is money just pouring out of local communities, pouring out of Northern Ireland, and leaving us, hostage to unsavory characters who control the oil taps, shall we say. As well as that, the Department for the Economy in Northern Ireland have recently released their new energy strategy, which for the first time makes commitments or works towards commitments to decarbonisation of heating in Northern Ireland. So there's opportunities there for, there's no one size fits all solution to this issue. The solution will depend on local needs and local resources. I'll come back to that shortly as well. But as part of that, they hope to develop a portfolio of options and learn from other places, particularly Scandinavia and Central Europe, where they're much better at this sort of community focused, community delivery of things like heating than we are. And then, of course, there's community equity. Again, when things are delivered, there's the money that goes on oil. Heating systems that are delivered for profit, again, represent a risk to people. There are issues there were of a monopoly. If you are part of a heating system owned by a private company, then it's regulation, strong regulation is all that stands between you and being taken advantage of. And again, those profits being made by that company are money that are being taken out of a local community, and that's money that's being spent on a fundamental service like heating. So the more of that we can keep in our communities and use to develop our communities, the fairer it is for everyone. I guess this isn't, I don't really need to explain that to this audience, but it's an important part of what we want to do. So enough setup. What is it we actually want to do? So instead of having a boiler on every house where you buy oil or buy gas or buy coal or buy even wood pellets, burn it and heat your house, when you have a lot of houses in close proximity, a community or a heat network or a district heating system is usually a lot more efficient. So instead of having one boiler in each house, so 200 houses in Edenderry, 200 boilers, you have one boiler or one, 2 or 3 boilers together, obviously, because if one breaks down, then you have backup, that supply heat to the houses in the forms of hot water through pipes. So you're not actually heating the water in your house. You pay based on how much heat you use, but that heat comes from a central source, which is a lot more efficient. Coupled with that, we want our heat not to come from burning anything, but from the resource we have beside us. And the main resource we have is the River Lagan. Now, you might say, how are you supposed to heat your house from the River Lagan, given that it has an average temperature of 12 degrees? But that's where something called heat pumps come in. So you might have heard a bit about heat pumps recently. And what you've probably heard about them is that they're a bit rubbish and then they're not very good at heating your houses. But what you've been hearing about are air source heat pumps, which basically work the same. The principle of a heat pump is the same as the principle of a fridge, except in reverse. So what it does is it uses electricity to pump heat from a cold place to a warm place. So you're concentrating the heat essentially. And for every unit of electricity you put in, you get a couple of units of heat out. So it's, in that sense, it's more than 100% efficient. Certainly a lot more efficient than a storage heater or an electric 3-bar fire or something like that. Now, where we are, there's also the opportunity to take some heat from an aquifer underground called the Sherwood Sandstone Aquifer, which sits under the whole of the Lagan Valley. But that's essentially the same principle. You're taking heat from water, you're concentrating it, and you're distributing it around houses. Water is better than air because water is denser than air and it holds more heat. So you can get more heat out of water for less effort than you can with air. So if you had air, if you were replacing the heat pumps the boilers in Edenderry with heat pumps, with air source heat pumps, you'd have to put one on every house and they'd have to be running pretty much all the time. And that's quite loud as well. Never mind anything on a cold day, that would be very loud. And the colder the outside temperature, the less well these things work. Whereas air temperature varies a lot more than water temperature. So by using water as a source or by using the ground as a source, you're much better protected against those variations. And of course, when it's colder, that's when you want the most heat. So it's not ideal for air source heat pumps. Now, that's not to say air source heat pumps don't always work. They do if you've got a well-insulated house. But as I mentioned earlier, most of Edenderry is not well insulated. These are old houses that don't even have cavity walls. Air source heat pumps give you, water to your radiators at about 50 or 60 degrees, which is colder than you would get out of an oil boiler or a gas boiler. So it's not ideal. And to fit those onto these houses would require maybe upwards of £20,000 worth of retrofitting per house. And these are not big houses, that's potentially 15-20% of the value of the house just to retrofit it to the point where you could put an air source heat pump on it. And that retrofitting would require you to put external cladding on the houses, which here people wouldn't accept because the brick buildings are part of the character of the place, and people would not be keen to fundamentally change that by putting external cladding on the houses. And then there's issues with damp, etc. So you can't put a water source heat pump on every single house, because every single house would have to have its own connection to the river or its own borehole. And that would be extremely difficult, extremely problematic, and extremely expensive. But what you can do is put one water source on the river, or one set of boreholes, etc., centralized, put the heat pumps there in that central location, and then lay pipes in the roads and provide the hot water to the house. So that's what we're trying to achieve, essentially. That's a classic district heating system. These are very common in Germany, in the former communist countries, Eastern Europe and farther east, very common in Scandinavia. And they've usually they're installed quite commonly on tower blocks, and they're installed in new developments. Retrofitting them is a bit more challenging, but this was still a lot more feasible approach than spending £20,000 insulating your house, putting a heat pump on it, and then paying the same for your heating as you already do. So, but this again, it's local solutions for local problems. So what we're proposing here won't necessarily work everywhere. It won't. A district heating scheme won't work somewhere particularly rural where you have very low density housing, but where you have high density housing, it's perfect. And the closer the houses are together, the more the advantages you get. And then having a local resource like the Lagan, or any sort of significant body of water, is key to this as well. So what we're proposing here would work throughout most of Belfast, certainly anywhere close to the Lagan itself. It'll also work by the sea, and it'll work close to any body of water. And then in places like the Antrim Plateau, which are quite geologically active, or which have high temperatures not too far below ground, the same approach works with geothermal sources. Now, this system will still use electricity. By our calculations, in the minute, we'd say for every 1 unit of electricity you put in, you get 3 units of heat out. So there's still a significant electricity consumption associated with that. But, well, our local grid is moving towards very, very high penetrations of renewable energy. So you're using, even if you're only taking that power directly from the grid, it's cleaner than it's cleaner than if you were burning oil or gas, not to mention the local air quality improvements there. But also there's actually the systems like this can benefit the grid. At times when there's high heat demand correlates with high wind. So often on our electricity system, when there's high wind, there's actually more wind generation available than we're able to use. So by increasing the electricity demand when it's windy, you're actually increasing the use of that renewable energy that would otherwise be lost. The part of the reason I showed that National Trust slide a little earlier, I'll actually go back to it, is that we're also investigating the possibility of a solar array in this field, the one that's closest to Edenderry here. It's actually a slight hill overlooking the village. And that would be coupled with battery storage. So we'd be able to, obviously heating demand and high solar generation aren't necessarily the best correlated, but if you can store that energy and then use that overnight, or use that when your heating demand, unless your electricity demand is higher, then there's quite a lot you can do with that, and you're using your own local renewable energy. So the team, so there's 4 directors of the co-op at the minute, and the 4 of us all live in Edenderry. Kyle on the left there is the mechanical engineer who works on these sort of schemes, whose idea set it off. There's myself there as well, and then Andrew, who's my next door neighbor, is also an engineer. He's a chemical engineer, and he works on water projects, so he's our treasurer. And then Steve on the right there, he's almost got a plug for his work, which is DC Tours. He does walk-in tours in Belfast City Centre. Highly recommend them. But he's he's worked very closely with the Residents Association and with community groups around Edenderry. So he's the one who keeps us engineers real. Now, what I don't have on the screen is all the help we've got from outside, which is what has been completely crucial. Tiziana, particularly, who has got us set up and going as a co-op, and Karen Arbuckle and the team at NICE, NI Community Energy, who have been absolutely indispensable in helping us meet the right people and in getting set up with our feasibility study, which I'll come to shortly. Now, why Edenderry? I've sort of mentioned this already, but there's the Active Residents Association. That's a view of the Lagan, 30 seconds from Edenderry. You wouldn't think, again, that's in Belfast. You wouldn't think you were in the city there, but you are. And we have a good sort of geothermal resource underneath us as well. But and the local community are very positive to the idea. Everything we've talked to people in the village about so far, certainly they're very positive. But it's also, as a small self-contained community, we see it as a perfect pilot project for the wider energy strategy. So we think what we can do here, what we hope to do here, can be replicated across Northern Ireland, could be replicated anywhere really that has the same sort of resources. And we're very keen to work with the Department for the Economy and anyone else looking to do something similar, because I mean, there's no point in us keeping this under our hat when we're trying to solve issues that are going to affect everybody. So the more we can work together, the better. So where are we now? As I said, this idea only started a year ago. So with a project like this, it's going to be a long road. But we, with thanks from NICE, we got a grant from the National Lottery. And we've used that to do a feasibility study with a company called GeoServe, who are experts in geothermal and heat pumps. And that's ongoing at the minute. In fact, we're sort of next week, we're going to be getting our first draft of that. But that's modeling the demand in the village, looking at the local resource, talking to the NI Environment Agency, etc., about possibilities. And then that's all of the engineering stuff is the easy bit, to be honest. The implementation, the funding models, and the ownership and the financing, that's the real tricky bit. And that's the stuff that we're at an early stage with, particularly because the 3 engineers out of the 4 directors, we could probably design the system itself in a weekend. But something like this is a very capital intensive project, but has a very, very long lifetime and provides a real tangible benefit to its users. So it's finding the right balance and also giving the people the confidence to invest in the system or to connect to the system. So this is this would be a first of a kind project in Northern Ireland. There are no heat pump district heating schemes in Northern Ireland, and there's certainly no community-owned heating schemes in Northern Ireland yet. But there are both elsewhere. I mean, even in Glasgow, not very far away at all, there are projects like ours already operational, but much, much bigger. And projects about the same scale as ours, operational as well. So we're not proposing anything groundbreaking. It's just bringing together a few things that haven't been done locally before. So our next steps are finishing this feasibility study, because this is really the core of what we're doing, and publicizing that with people in the village, and then bringing that to the Department for the Economy. Because this is a first of a kind project in Northern Ireland, there isn't even regulation in place at the minute for heat networks for district heating schemes. So the DFE are open to the possibility of us being a pilot project as part of the new energy strategy, and with support from themselves. And that would help with not only showing the possibilities of systems like this, but also helping to figure out the regulation and everything like that. And then at the pre-construction development and developing working towards a plan and submission and developing the financing and ownership models, which of course, as a co-op, that's the core of what we want. We want this system to be built and run and owned by the users, by the members of the co-op, and to be run for the benefit of Edenderry, so that that as much as possible of that investment goes into keeping the prices down and keeping the system fair and working well for everyone. So yeah, the last word, fundraising, is going to be the real key to this. But there's aside from the potential for community share offers and fundraising that way, there's also substantial grant funding announced over the next few years between the department and through EU peace funding, because this is a real area of focus for the next few years. So we're hoping to be able to tap into that and help use that to develop the project. I've gone through quite a lot there, so please, I'm very happy to take questions at this point.
We have a question from Ken in the chat, or if Ken wants to verbalize now. Yeah.
What level of support are you seeing in the village? Is the idea being well received? Yes, everyone's very supportive. Now, it's easy to be supportive at this stage, if I'm being frank. It's when we have this feasibility study, when we have drawings, and when we have numbers, and when people know what would it mean, what it would cost. That'll be when we have to really sell the idea. But I think world events recently are helping make that argument for us. And like the real issue with a project like this is it's a very front-loaded project. There's a lot of upfront investment, and then the benefits are accrued over 20, 30, 40 years. So you have to put in a lot of that work and all that investment right at the start. But then what you get out of that is stability, reliability, and those lower costs long term. So as I said, the idea is well received, but it'll be probably in about 2 months' time when we go out with the real figures, etc. That will really be testing the water. But if it'll work anywhere, if it'll be well received anywhere, it's here. It's a very open-minded community. People are very community focused here as well. So I'm quite optimistic.
Ronan, we have another couple of questions. Martin first and Kerry after.
Yeah, is that in the chat or?
No, it's
No.
If you wanted to lower your presentation, we can.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, fantastic. So
Okay.
yes, guys, come in, jump in, and now with your voice.
Hi, Ronan. I'm just a pity now because I was going to buy a house in 2002 in Edenderry. Now it was one of them terraced along the front, but I didn't. I bought elsewhere. But Ronan, I tell you what it is. I've just been given a large sum of money from the Department of. Introduce myself. My name is Martin Doherty. I'm Centre Director for the Centre for Advanced Sustainable Energy. I'm working on a number of different projects. Tiziana is working on a project which this just wraps itself around lovely. But what I'm actually looking at now is there another aspect to this over and above the innovation of actually developing community ownership in Northern Ireland? But one of your bosses, presumably Roger Henderson, sits on my board as well, and we've put out a call. There's about £3.7 million worth of funding, and we'd be very keen to fund projects that are going to drive towards the goals of the Northern Ireland energy strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain criteria around it, but we're quite keen to work with people in this sphere. There has to be an element of innovation. And you have to have, you're likely to have 3 different companies involved in terms of the supply chain. So who's going to buy the pump, who's going to fit the pump, who's going to put the infrastructure in place, how do you keep the pipes warm so that water gets to the houses? All that. So they probably fall in the criteria, but is there anything particularly unique or a combination of things in terms of the energy system or the heating system? You mentioned the use of photovoltaics as well to help run the system. We would be quite keen to have a chat with you rather than take up your time now.
Okay, yeah.
On the side, if you, Tiziana, can give you my email address, and we would be very keen to talk to you about this. Is something I would be very keen to do. But it has to fall within certain criteria, so don't get your hopes up. Do you know what I mean? But we would be very, very happy to explore what they may be. if
I think
that's okay with you.
the innovation side of it is probably there's two sides of it. There's the heating system itself, but then there's the electricity supply.
Mhm.
And we've worked a bit, or we've spoken a bit with the energy storage, the electricity storage company, if you're aware of them.
Uh-huh.
And they're sort of looking at this a bit with us. And the sort of the high level vision there is that you'd have the solar array and a battery that would be primarily supplying the electricity needs of the heating system.
Mhm.
But then it would obviously also be able to support the grid as well through short-term storage and system services and things like that, because you have the flexibility of that battery. So it's, I guess, the sort of the innovation aspect there is bringing all of that together.
Well, look, let's put
Yeah.
some time in a diary.
Yeah,
for us.
yeah, no,
I-
very, very
I-
happy to do that.
Kerry to get on the screen here.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Kerry.
Hi, hopefully I'll have a quiet enough room to try and ask my questions. First of all, thank you so much. That was really, really exciting. I'm Kerry. I'm calling in from Open Ormo, which is like a community group over on Ballinafie direction. And we have kind of been poking around with an idea of how do you collectivise in order to be more sustainable and affordable for people living locally. So obviously we have the Lagan there too. And I'm not technical in the slightest. So the first kind of queries that I would have is around like, do you need to engage quite heavily with the local council to get land to actually put your pumps onto?
Yes.
Okay.
But the council are very receptive to that. So what I didn't mention, but where we're hoping to put the actual hardware itself is on council land.
Okay, I would love to keep in touch with you somehow to see how your pilot goes. Sorry if I didn't lose a baby on the floor here. And yeah, it'd be great to keep in touch. I would love you to be pilot project number 1 and then tell us how to be pilot project number 2.
Yeah, absolutely. If in fact you could do the same thing in the Ormo area as we're doing, but you could do it on a much bigger scale. There's no reason you couldn't. The Lagan's big enough certainly to give you that amount of heat.
And there's no negatives about like if you take heat out of the Lagan that you're leaving it too cold for the fish or anything like that.
There are constraints on that, and that's an important factor in designing how much you can get out of a system, which is why we've spoken to the Environment Agency who set those rules. But I think as long as your outflow, as long as you don't change the temperature of the river by more than 1.5 degrees, I think it is, then you're fine. But that can all be figured out when you're modeling it.
And how, just in terms of the scale, like if there's, I think is there 7,000 houses, I think in Ballinafie, would that need to be like a huge big factory effectively, like a lot of land that you would need, or is it?
No, the land requirement isn't that big. So there's one that's just opened in Glasgow that supplies enough heat for, I think it's 20,000 houses. Just trying to get the figure there. Oh, sorry. No, sorry, it's not as big as that. About 2,000 houses. And you're not talking a huge building here. Sort of a small warehouse size thing, if even. So it doesn't have to be that big.
Okay.
Just needs a good electricity connection.
What's the best way of contacting you guys if I get a bit of interest in the group and try in the long run? Do you have a Facebook page or?
At the minute, the best way is probably by email.
Okay.
I think we'll share the email address after this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Lovely. I have to go and do a school run shortly, so if I'm leaving, that's the other thing. Is there any chance of getting a recording of this session that I could share with Open Ormo?
Yes, Perry. Yes, to everything. And we will share also the presentation with the details of Ronan, with the Ronan permission. If
absolutely.
Ronan is so yes,
perfect.
Of course.
Well, I'll have to probably leave at about 10, probably in about 5 minutes to go to the school run. So if that could be forwarded to me later, that would be amazing.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, any other questions? Any other interest or? Certainly for us, it's important to have this kind of community energy project start to really become central to the energy strategy and to the actual plan of the Belfast City Council. So it's important that we discuss, we learn from each other, and we collectively try to find the solution, the best fit our own communities, the needs of our community. And I think what is important for Ronan and Ronan's presentation is that everything started from the community. Okay, they were lucky, 3 engineers in a row in the street, fantastic, they had great skills, but the need of that community was paramount, that's where the project starts. Can I ask Ronan, what made you decide, you and your colleagues at the beginning, to come down the cooperative route? I know that you personally have experience of charitable organization, but why did you decide to come down the cooperative route?
I think there's a couple of things. Part of it is like climate change and heat, fuel prices and everything. These are all global problems, and it's very easy to sort of become apathetic or overwhelmed by that. Like, human brains aren't really designed to cope with things on that scale, but we are designed, and we work very well on the small scale. So like, these are global problems, but the solutions are often local solutions, and it's very empowering to get stuck into something like that. And even if you're only making a change on a local level, you're setting an example, and it's something that can be recreated elsewhere. Part of it as well is something like this it's a big deal for somebody to trust you to heat their house and to commit to letting you heat their house. And it's been done badly before with district heating systems, and doing it, you're more likely to get people to buy in and to sign up to it if they are part of it themselves, and if they know that you're not doing it to fleece them. You know, we've no interest in making money for this. We want to see this happen, and it's definitely more likely to happen if the community own it, and if it's for the community, rather than just seeing the community as a resource to extract money from. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and
the cooperative is the way to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, because in a cooperative you can kind of distribute the profit in a different way than in a company.
And it's perfect for that, because everybody who uses the system is getting the benefit of it. So if they have a voice in how it's run and all of that, then it's the perfect way to run something like this.
If I may, one more question, I suppose an offer of help again, I suppose. Ronan, across the university, we're working very much closer now with our colleagues. I'm housed in chemical engineering, but we now realize that an awful lot of the solutions require community buy-in and societal buy-in as such. And we work quite closely with colleagues such as John Barry, Amanda Slevin, and various other psychologists, and they are all very keen to get projects similar to this so that they can improve the learning of students and stuff. So would you mind if I can put them in touch with you, because there's
absolutely
wonderful research. No, it's a two-way street, I would imagine, is that A, they can get to do the research, but B, they can do an awful lot of the work you have to do in terms of community consultation and engagement and overcoming them barriers that you highlighted there. So again, when we have a chat, I might bring a few other people to the table.
Yeah,
if you're happy with that. Okay, sorry.
And if you have any students of your own who want to do some design work, I'm sure we can accommodate them too.
Let's see where we can go. It's a very exciting area, and a lot of people are very keen to know more about this area. So we'll open up as many doors for you as possible.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Queens and Martin. But is anybody else that wanted to have the final kind of question before we close the session? Please, before you go, can you leave something in the chat room? How much you loved this session and your evaluation? Yes, some good points, some bad points if we wanted to improve. But while everybody is doing that, is anybody else that wants to discuss more? John? I'm interested in hear from you. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Sorry again, just having
Hello. Good afternoon, Sean. I know that you are working in a cooperative bank. Is that true?
Yes, I am. I'm the relationship manager at the Co-operative Bank, and I specialise in cooperatives.
Yes.
Forgive me, sorry, not on camera, as I, again, a dog on my lap and eating as well for my lunch here. So, but yeah, so again, fantastic what you were talking about, Ronan. Sounds really positive, and we're equally is really invested in kind of renewable energy and information at the moment, which I will happily send over to you. And Tiziana, it would be great to catch up as well to see how we can support with cooperatives from your point of view.
Yes.
And if anyone else on the call that's got a cooperative business, if they want to reach out in terms of banking, I'm really focusing on the cooperative sector and the movement there, and you'll kind of have me to kind of guide you through the onboarding process and as a key contact for everything to do with your banking.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you for introducing yourself. And it's one of the things that we really need, an open and honest conversation with the banking system, how difficult it is sometimes for us to open bank accounts, but also, to really get the funding for these very early start projects. So yes, for any kind of help and any kind of information, you can send it to Northern Ireland. Where are you based, Sean?
I'm based in Manchester, but I'm based all across
UK,
across the UK for this particular sector. So if there's anyone who wants to pick up with me, it's my name surname there at cooperativebank.co.uk.
Brilliant. Well, we've opened our bank account with the Co-op Bank, so that's very convenient.
Oh, there you go, Ronan. So I'll be in contact very soon indeed then.
Brilliant.
Thank you for introducing yourself.
No problem.
Ronan, the last few words for you. How do you feel about this session, and where you are going to go with your learning now? Of course, you said that the feasibility is the next step. Anything else that you wanted to add on and conclude this session?
Yeah, I guess a point we've got a few times is that, and you mentioned it there, is that we're very lucky because we're engineers, and that gives us a big advantage. And that is a big barrier because this hasn't been done here before, and because everybody's learning. That is a big barrier to other groups doing what we're doing. But as part of what we're doing, like, we have that relationship with GeoServe. There are other companies that can provide a lot of support for this kind of thing, and everything we're doing here can be replicated elsewhere. So hopefully there isn't really a huge need for that level of technical expertise, because the technical side of it is the easy bit. The hard bit is selling it to people and raising the capital. So I wouldn't let that put anybody off. I wouldn't want that to put anybody off doing this sort of thing. It's just, I guess the hard bit is knowing the right people to reach out to and getting that support. But it is available, and we're figuring it out as we go along, and we hope to be able to share that with everybody else who wants to do the same sort of thing.
Thank you. That's very positive. So we actually can do it. It's how we do it is maybe the question, but we definitely can do it.
Yes.
So how do we collaborate also with each other to make this interesting project really the first one in Northern Ireland? That's another big question, a big ask to the cooperatives movement, but also to the cooperators out there that wants to give a hand. So on our side, we can close here. We will distribute the video and the presentation of Ronan with the Ronan details for you to contact Ronan directly. Be in touch with us if you need a bit more generic support as well about cooperatives in Northern Ireland. For the moment, I'll say goodbye and see you at the next event. Bye-bye.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you, Ronan.